Okay, we're in the book of Revelation, and we are in the midst of a series in Revelation, which is the dragon and the lamb. And what we have seen is this series started in chapter 12, where we saw the dragon's attempt to stop God from bringing about his promised kingdom. He tried to stop the king from coming, from the king of taking hold of his authority in heaven, and then also trying to take away the king's subjects. And that all of his attempts failed. And then he turned to the church, the woman's other children, which in chapter 13, the writer John gave us more specifics about the instruments that Satan, the dragon, would use. Specifically, the first half talked about the beast or the Antichrist who would come and be a world leader and have much power, and was granted to him to have power and to even conquer the saints. And then the second half talked about the false prophet who would have a lot of false miracles and false wonders and point everyone to worship the Antichrist. And after those two sections, John gave instructions to the saints where he stopped his vision and gave comforting, instructive wisdom to his audience. And it was out of love. It's really out of concern for them. When you go through this, it's going to be difficult. This is what you have to maintain. It's almost like a pep talk or an encouragement. The first was instructions to the saints concerning the perseverance and faith and accepting where God has put you and to be faithful where God has put you, whether it be captivity or even death. But you would be a great light and great witness for God. And the second one was concerning the number of the beasts, to confirm that, yes, that person, although how good that person, how righteous, how godly that person looks, is actually the Antichrist. Last week we began chapter 14, which was entitled The Victors and Pronouncements. We saw last week the victors in the Song of the 144,000 in verses 1 through 5, where Christ has delivered them, the 144,000 Jewish spiritual army, through the tribulation. And now they're singing that song of victory. And these were great men of faithfulness and of godly character. And all of heaven is rejoicing. And they are standing with Christ on Mount Zion at his return. And they are in prime location for the celebration and for the establishment of the kingdom. And then the second section that we started last week, we covered the first angelic pronouncement, which is in verse 6 and 7, which is a pronouncement of the eternal gospel. Looking back at that pronouncement, it was broken into three commands: fear God, give him glory, and worship him. And I want to make a second note about this. One, just as a way of reminder, these three proclamations happened during the second half of the tribulation, specifically. And the first one is this eternal gospel, which is proclaimed to the whole entire world, is proclaimed loudly. It communicates to us that gospel, God's gospel, will be out there, calling all men to fear God, to know who truly he is, and to give him glory, and then to worship him as creator, as their owner in his rightful spot. But notice that it says to fear God and to give him glory, and to give him glory because the hour of his judgment has come. This week, as I was thinking about this passage, another thought came to me, which was, John is saying this specifically because this is a difficult time. And when the saints are in persecution, captivity, in difficult circumstances, how do you give him glory during those things? Well, maybe by being patient, maybe being kind to those in need, being good to those, blessing those who persecute you, maybe even not taking revenge for the evil that's all around you, forgiving people all around you. Why? What helps us to give that up? Well, it's knowing that God is about to judge, that God is the judge. He's the one that will avenge all sin. He's the one that will make all wrongs right. That's what Romans 12 talks about. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And being a people that knows that's true will help us to go through this and not try to take that judgment upon ourselves, but knowing that God will do it better, in a more full and complete fashion than we could ever do. And his judgment will be right and will account for everything. And he will make all things right. So this week, we're going to continue and look at the second part, the second two pronouncements of the angels, and then John's wisdom and instructions that he gives concerning those pronouncements in Revelation 14, 8 through 12. So let's go ahead and begin with the second angelic pronouncement. The second one is the pronouncement of earthly judgment on Babylon, verse 8. Let's go ahead and read verse 8. It says, "And another angel, a second one, followed, saying, 'Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, she who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality.'" Now notice, here's the second one. It's clear that John wants us to realize that this is a sequence, and he's seeing these angels come in one at a time in a sequence, but this is all the same scene, all the same time period. The first one preached the gospel. The second one is warning. It's warning against a false religion. So what is this pronouncement? The pronouncement is fallen, fallen is Babylon. It's repetition of it has fallen. The grammar communicates that the fall of this city is absolutely certain. But from the other text in Revelation, we know that that won't happen until the end. In chapter 16, verse 19, we know that the fall of Babylon is connected with the seventh bowl judgment. And that fall of Babylon is recorded for us in chapter 17 and specifically in chapter 18 in great detail. And in fact, in chapter 18, verses 1 through 3, we see these very same words, but in a more extended fashion. So this verse, this warning, is somewhat of a preview in the text. But it's letting us know that God is at work, warning everyone that's on the earth that this false religion, this woman, this Babylon, the city, the great city, is false and will lead ultimately to harm and downfall. So, it's a warning to people not to be seduced by this false religion because her end is destruction. And thus, there is not an option in this false religion. We had the gospel, and here's going to be your competing view of reality, the competing view for God, and this false religion is not an option. Notice it says Babylon the Great. So this false religion is going to be great. It's going to have power. It's going to have influence. And it says she who made all the nations drink. So her power is over people throughout the world. There's people throughout all the nations that will partake of her false religion. Now, wine here is a metaphor. These people will be impaired by her wine as one is with alcohol. They won't be rational. They won't have a clear mind. They will be consuming the passion of her immorality. Now, the word for passion there, it's an unfortunate translation. It's translating it metaphorically. The word there is actually wrath. Will drink of the wine of the wrath of her immorality. That's a far better understanding. And in fact, the ancient translations use words for wrath and anger and have nothing to do with passion. So this is the wrath of God, who has given them over to spiritual immorality. These are people who are not serving and loving the one true God, but exchange the living God for creation, as Romans 1 tells us. So thus drinking this cup is part of her deception, leading to the fall of her followers, and thus them receiving the wrath of God. Okay, so who or what is Babylon? Babylon is obviously personified as a seductive woman, as a false religion. But what religion? The religion that this is representing is Islam. Let me show you why. First, she will be a violent religion. Verse 17, 6, chapter 17, verse 6, it says, "And I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus." Chapter 18, verse 24, "And in her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been slain on the earth." So not just against Christians, but a hatred and killing of all that are different. Now you might say, now wait a second, the Antichrist, if anyone doesn't bow to the image, he's killing people left and right as well. And that would definitely include Christians. Absolutely correct. Absolutely right. The Antichrist's religion, false religion, is going to be killing people if they don't submit. So does Islam. Let's keep going. The next category, she is destroyed before Christ's return. Look at 18:9 through 10. "And the kings of the earth who committed acts of immorality and live sensually with her will weep and lament over her when they see the smoke of her burning, standing at a distance because of the fear of her torment, saying, 'Woe, woe, the great city Babylon, the strong city, for in 1 hour her judgment has come.'" Now, this is before Christ's return. When does the Antichrist fall? When Christ returns. Let me show you a third argument why this is not the Antichrist, but this is Islam. The beast's forces fight against her. The Antichrist will fight against her. Chapter 17, verses 15 through 17, it says, And he said to me," this is talking about an angel talking to John, "the waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues." Remember, waters represent pagan nations. Verse 16, "And the 10 horns which you saw and the beast, these will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked, and will eat her flesh and will burn her up with fire." That doesn't sound like people that are together. Verse 17, "For God has put it in their hearts to execute his purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God will be fulfilled." So God will take judgment on the false religion of Islam by having the beast's kingdom, empire, the Antichrist, fight against them. And in this case, Satan's goals will also be in conjunction with God's, which is for their judgment. And we see that this is in line with what we saw as the sixth trumpet, where the 2 million man army comes. And then also remember in the future, at the end, when we have the Battle of Armageddon, the beast has to fight still another army. It's all in conjunction. It's all in line with having that other religion that's set up. That is a religion of war, a religion of hate, and one that's a part of the wrath of God for rejecting God. So going back to the text, Babylon is representing Islam as personified as a seductive woman. And in the second half of the tribulation, the world will be warned of her coming doom. And that she will, if you are part of her, you will not be on the winning side. The third pronouncement is a pronouncement of eternal punishment, verses 9 through 11. Let's start with verse 9. It says, "Then another angel, a third one, followed them, saying with a loud voice, 'If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives a mark on his forehead or on his hand,' there's going to be consequences." But let's first look at the parameters, the situation, if anyone fits these categories. First, we have a third angel. So we had the first one preaching the eternal gospel, hope to everyone. The second one saying this religion is secondary, it's false, it's going to fall. Third angel comes in, and it's giving a further warning against the nation and religion of the beast, the Antichrist. And notice again, it's a loud voice. It's going to be clear message warning the earth. As if anyone worships the beast and worships there is a present which focuses on a continual. This is people who have made that decision and live a life that worships the beast and thus takes the mark. It expresses one's reverence and affection and honor and complete submission. They're sold out to the beast instead of God. And thus they take his mark of ownership and loyalty. So thus they will be enjoying the benefits of his kingdom. They will be buying, they'll be trading, they'll have food, they'll have money, they'll have resources, and comforts on earth. They will have rest, relatively good rest here on earth. And they'll be receiving his false promises. Verse 10 goes on and says, people who do this, that person, he also will drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is mixed in full strength in the cup of his anger. So like those of Islam, the beast worshippers will also drink of God's wrath. Such wrath is not an impulsive outburst of divine emotion aimed at people whimsically or out of control, but it's a settled, rational, merciless, graceless response of the righteous God against all evil. It's that firm stand. So they will drink of the wine of the wrath of God. And that wine is mixed in full strength. Now what he's talking about there is wine was often mixed with water. A lot of times it was in equal parts. 1 part water to 1 part wine. It could even be as mixed as great as 1 part wine, 3 parts water. And they would do this in a mixing bowl. And then basically we served like a punch bowl, where they would drink out of that, get glasses and either dunk them or pour them out. And just as a side note, speaking about the wrath of God being like a wine that's mixed from the bowl in which people drink, what's the next judgment, series of judgments? The bowl judgments? Setting that up as well, as far as giving you that idea, that image of, here's the bowl of wine, but it's going to be unmixed. So here, it's God's wrath is not watered down. Literally, when it says full strength in the text, it actually says unmixed. You can see why it says full strength, because it makes more sense in English. But the text literally says it's mixed, unmixed. So they receive his full wrath towards their sin and rebellion. When someone drinks unmixed wine, it's generally understood that they want to get drunk. And that's the idea here, that God will make them drink of his wine, which is his wrath, in full potency. The image is that God causes them to drink until they fall down drunk, never to rise again. And this is a common idea, an image in the Old Testament. I want to share with you in Jeremiah 25:15. It says, "For thus the Lord, the God of Israel, says to me, take this cup of the wine of the wrath from my hand and cause all the nations to whom I send you to drink it. They will drink and stagger and go mad because of the sword that I will send among them." And then in the middle there, Jeremiah is sent to Jerusalem and the cities of Judah with this cup, with this message. And then in verse 27 it says, "You shall say to them, thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, drink, be drunk, vomit, fall, and rise no more because of the sword which I will send among you." And I listed just a few of the other Old Testament passages that talk about the cup of the wrath of God and the wine of the wrath of God. So in our context in Revelation, who will have the sword that will devour them? The sword will be coming from Christ's mouth at his second coming. And as a side note as well, why don't we drink from that cup of God's wrath? Don't we deserve it? Haven't we sinned? Matthew 26:39 says, and he, Jesus, went a little beyond them and fell on his face and prayed, saying, my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. That cup of God's wrath is for every single person, because every single person has sinned. The difference is we don't experience or taste from that cup because Christ drank from that cup for us. He drank of the full wrath of God. That's the idea of propitiation. When he was on the cross and took the penalty of sin, he experienced that for us, so we wouldn't have to.